All right. Well, welcome everyone. This is the traffic calming meeting for Greenland Avenue. It's May 6, 2024. We're meeting at 5:30 p.m. Virtually. So we're going to start off by talking about what is traffic calming, just some high-level information, generally get you introduced to the program. If any questions come up, we're going to stop a couple of times throughout the meeting to you take any, but also feel free to put them in the chat at any time, and then we'll be able to address them one by one as the meeting proceeds. So the Nashville Neighborhood Street Traffic Calming Program, that's what NSTC stands for, is one that really focuses on residential streets. We also do physical solutions that lower speeds over significant lengths. What that means is we prefer speed cushions or tables or things that will actually affect cars as they're traveling, um, over striping and signage, things like that. Those can certainly be a help, but they're easy to ignore if you prefer to. So you'll see that this program leans a lot on things like vertical measures, and then ultimately the goal is lower speeds. A significant length, that just kind of means we don't do these projects block by block. We like to choose, a longer section if at all possible. Uh, I say that this is one block of Greenland Avenue, but y'all have quite a long block, as you know. Um, and then the primary goal of this program is speed reduction. We know that speeding really does cause a lot of the problems that we face, whether it be traffic crashes, poor pedestrian experience, what have you. So that's sort of why we're laser focused on that in this program. There are 3 E's of traffic calming. Those are education, enforcement, and engineering. You'll see that engineering is big, bold, and underlined, because that's what NDOT, the department we're under, has the most control over. Certainly we can do a little bit of educating, make sure people know that speeding is dangerous, that neighborhoods are, for a lower speed. And then ultimately, we don't have a lot of tools to actually enforce speeding with things like tickets. And while I'm sure Nashville's police would love to, they have a lot of other things on their plate as well. So by doing an engineered solution, it's kind of like a way to get those things accomplished, but with something permanent that is passive, and doesn't take continuous resources to reinforce. I mentioned this already, but we really are looking to get speeding on Greenland Avenue down, and the primary reason for that is safety. So the traffic calming program is one of the many things that NDOT does in pursuit of Vision Zero. That is a vision that nobody should have to die or be seriously injured on Nashville streets. The infographic we're seeing here is sort of meant to communicate why speed is such an important part of that. And what we see is when cars are traveling at 25 miles an hour or thereabout, if they were to hit somebody, that person that gets hit has like that 89% chance of survival. That unfortunately goes way down as the speeds go up. So in the neighborhood of like 45 miles an hour, you only really have about a third a chance of making it out alive. So reducing speeds does have a really big effect on safety, particularly when it comes to pedestrian crashes, but it's also a quality of life issue. And we know that, no one likes people driving excessively fast, where they live. This program is a really popular one. So the number of applications that we had to choose from when we selected Greenland Avenue was over 480. We selected 25, so we're excited to dig into those, and y'all are actually the first of those 25 having their meeting one tonight. But as you can see, there are a lot of streets that would like to have traffic calming implemented, but we really were only able to choose the 25 that were most in need. So there are a few things that the traffic calming program can do. We're going to talk about sort of what that toolbox looks like in a few minutes. But there are a lot of different things that NDOT can do, or Nashville in general can do, that'll fall outside of the traffic calming program. So if anything should come up that you all are looking to see that we're not able to include in this project, just want to make sure everyone is aware of Hub Nashville, or 311 as the phone number, as a really good resource to request things that we might not be able to cover with this project. Um, so with that, I'll take a pause and just sort of, does anyone have questions on what we've covered so far? Next, we're going to sort of talk about how Greenland was chosen and some more specifics about y'all's street. All right. Well, we'll just go ahead and move right along. So like I said, there was a pretty huge list of streets that have applied in the queue, and y'all were selected based on the scoring system detailed in that pie chart off to the left. So essentially what happens after a street applies is we go out and collect data on the street. We measure how fast people are driving, how many people are driving on a particular day. And then we also look at some, crash history, like were there any pedestrians or cyclists struck by cars in the last several years. And then those two smaller slices, the non-driver accommodations and trip destinations, that's sort of asking like how walkable is the neighborhood. So if you have sidewalks, that's actually will hurt your score because we want to focus on roads where there aren't really other options. And then trip destinations, that's our schools nearby, our parks nearby. We like to take those into account because we know that people have a reason to be walking to those things, and not that people don't want or need to walk on any particular street, but we expect more pedestrian activity near parks and schools. So that's sort of the rationale behind including those. Um, so Greenland in particular, this is some of the data that we collected during our prioritization process. We measured an 85th percentile speed of 37 miles an hour. Now, what that means, it's kind of like a median, but not at halfway. So 15% of the people we measured were driving faster than 37, and 85% were driving 37 miles an hour or slower. Um, Unfortunately, that is really fast. It definitely makes sense that you all were wanting traffic calming to happen here because the speed limit is posted at 25, but a lot of people are driving quite a bit faster than that. And especially near a school, we recognize that is a pretty big problem. On the brighter side, the volume is relatively low for a street like Greenland. 1,100 cars per day, that does sound like quite a lot, but relative to other neighborhood streets kind of like yours, that isn't too many. I think both Riverwood and McAlpine to the north and south had more. Doesn't affect the fact that y'all been chosen. So at this point, we're doing the project in some way, shape, or form, either way. But it was kind of an interesting observation we made. And then the street width, that's hovers between 21 and 22 feet wide. The reason I make that point is there are some measures that work well on wider roads and some that really only apply to narrower ones. Greenland is on the narrower end of the spectrum in terms of street width, so that's worth noting. This here is a map of the section of Greenland that applied and was selected. So it goes from a Gallatin Pike to the west, down to Kennedy Avenue, off to the east. This is a screenshot of Nashville's traffic calming tracker. So this is a tool that anyone can view online. Googling Nashville traffic calming will get you there pretty quick, but there's also a QR code at the end of the slides that'll take you to their website as well. And you can see a lot of different colors here. So what's going on is the kind of magenta, purpley lines. Those are streets that have applied but have not yet been selected. Green has been selected, or I guess light green has been selected, but is still in the design phase. Teal is ready to install. It's kind of in this construction queue. And then yellow here, that'd be the Brush Hill and the Riverwood. Those are streets that are currently, voting on their traffic calming project that we've already designed. So we can talk a little bit more about how the voting will work later in the meeting. But um, a lot of traffic calming going on around Inglewood, and that makes a little bit of sense, just sort of given that y'all have a pretty straight roads, and blocks that aren't too tight. So it is fairly easy to pick up some speed as you're driving around, even if you don't, intentionally do so. So next, we're going to go ahead and talk about the program's toolkit, but I'll take one of more quick pauses for questions if anyone has, anything, to ask about what we've covered so far, the prioritization and the street characteristics. Okay, moving on to the toolkit. Speed cushions is usually what we do on traffic calming projects. They're a vertical measure, so they're kind of like speed bumps, but they're different because they're stretched way out, to look for like a low or a higher target speed. So a speed bump is something you'd find in like a grocery store parking lot, somewhere you need to be going like 5 to 10 miles an hour. Speed cushions are more for, the speeds you drive on neighborhood streets, that 20 to 20 mile an hour range. Speed cushions are unique because they have these gaps between them. They're like a very standard 6 feet wide. And the reason for that is they're designed to affect smaller vehicles like we would all drive, with the intended target speed, while larger vehicles like ambulances and fire trucks that have wider wheelbases, they're more easily able to traverse these without as much impact. Not to say they won't touch it at all, but their wheels are going to sort of hit those sloped sides and not have to significantly slow down while they're on their way to emergencies. They do come in a variety of lengths. Those are 10.5 foot, and 14 foot. Those are chosen based on, how kind of the target speed, how many we're doing. The 10.5 foot is usually what we do in situations, like Greenwood, where we'll have several in a row, and we're not, looking to slow people down to a crawl, but just sort of enforce the expected speed that we have on the street. Related to speed cushions, but different, are speed tables. Really, the only difference here is these stretch all the way across the road. Um, we don't tend to go to these as like the default. We'll use them in certain situations, like if the street has a really awkward width that we're not quite able to cover with speed cushions, we may do a table. Um, or if it's a street that uh, really wouldn't be on the way to other places, if we're not as concerned with those emergency vehicles, we might have tables installed. Um, we prefer doing these because we know they work. Um, so this is a study that NDOT conducted to basically validate the national research that already exists. So since, like, the early 2000s, late 90s, traffic calming and vertical measures have been a thing, that are studied and implemented all over the country. This was a study that was intended to just verify, do they work in Nashville the same as they work everywhere else? And for the most part, they do. We can see by these two bar charts, the average speed before and after went from 31 down to 22. And that 85th percent speed, like we talked about earlier, that went down from 37 to 25. So those are really encouraging results. We were, happy to know that all of our work is not for nothing here. Um, but basically, these are the results that sort of affirm that, the approach we're proposing to take is one that will, you know, have the intended goals. Some other tools that we have at our disposal are radar feedback signs. We can't put cushions everywhere. For instance, curves are tricky because we don't want them to surprise anyone. And then also steep slopes are places we can't do cushions just because the way those are designed. Um, they'll fail a lot sooner if they're on a hill. So in instances where we can't do cushions, but we still want some sort of suggestion that people watch their speed, we'll put radar feedback signs. There are also roads that are just too heavily trafficked for speed cushions. We'll do these here as well. Greenland, like I said, doesn't have so much traffic that we'll need to go that route, and that's really preferable for us. We know that these radar feedback signs do something, but they are prone to people getting used to them, and their effect may wear off over a given period of time.
A little
Um,
bit closer gap period, like between the cushions, like so, like especially on the straightway where they are absolutely flying down, going 50 to 70 miles an hour at times.
um, Can I restate your question and just make sure I understand correctly? Are you asking if there can be a smaller gap between the cushions? So like the three that you see in the top right, like scrunch them together?
It's
You mean,
multifaceted. Yes. So could they be closer together where people can't straddle it in their big trucks? A and B, can you also put the proximity between each speed cushion down the road closer together so they can't gather a lot more momentum and then hit brakes again?
yeah, definitely. So I will say the trucks available on the commercial market today, um, not all of them will be as affected by speed cushions as a typical car. That's not a problem that NDOT is going to be able to solve super easily. Certainly not by using speed cushions. Um, we'll just have to table that one. Um, but these are the tools we have.
But you also have the other big guy that you can use, correct? That you show on the next slide, the
The
speed table.
tables, yeah, the tables actually, the longer you stretch out a vertical measure like this, the effect is lower. Um, so for optimizing for like the most impact on a vehicle like a truck, the shorter cushions would actually be more effective in that regard.
Okay.
So certainly if folks are leaning that direction, 7-foot cushions are not out of the question. Um, and then in terms of spacing along the road, we'll look at how many we've proposed. But basically, we are sort of hugging the shorter spacing end of our design parameters for exactly that reason. So if you look at the pictures here, you can't see another speed cushion in front of the set that we see. We'll space them closer together than that.
Okay.
These are spaced fairly far apart.
I think Greenland and Riverwood are very unique in that they have a straight stretch from Gallatin straight down. People use it like a racetrack.
Oh yeah, Riverwood was a street that I worked on recently. Like I said, they're voting now, but they're very similar in their characteristics, and we also saw a lot of speeding on Riverwood.
Okay. I'll quit bothering you now. Sorry.
No, no,
For the answers.
no. Bother away. I'll keep going with the tools, but there will be plenty of time for questions and discussion. Um, okay, so the next thing is narrowing, so pavement markings. On really wide streets, this can help sort of define where we expect cars to be and sort of psychologically narrow the road. Because the wider the space you have to drive, the easier it is to comfortably drive fast without necessarily realizing you're doing that. Um, it can increase comfort for pedestrians. So on the road that you see here, there's sort of enough space to walk in, and you sort of know I'm over here, you're over there. It's okay. I will say that doesn't work quite as well on roads that are sort of that minimum width. So if we were to do this on Greenland, we'd be striping off like 1 to half a foot, and that's not going to have as much of an effect as it would on a wider road. Um, things we can do for really large intersections are called bulb outs. That's basically if we have big sweeping turns where it's conducive to going fast around a corner, maybe not seeing if somebody's crossing the street. These are intended to sort of just tighten that up, force vehicles to take turns a little more deliberately. And then it also has an effect of shortening the distance that one has to cross while they're walking along the street. So we do propose these in a few situations. The one on the top left, that's like major or massive intersection, doesn't need to be that big anymore because it's not industrial. And then the one on the lower right, that's proposed in kind of the 5 Points area. Those streets aren't huge, but they have a lot of parallel parking, and often that parking will create blind spots where pedestrians are less safe. So there's a couple different reasons we can do bulb outs, but ultimately the idea is that you're taking pavement that doesn't necessarily need to be there and reallocating it to pedestrians. Things we do on like wider roads, so not quite on the table for Greenland just because there isn't room, or chicanes. Sort of similar to the bulb outs. These force speeds to be lower just by making drivers maneuver around some striping. It's not a vertical measure, so if I wanted to just gun it and drive over the lines, that's still physically possible. But in certain situations, we do these just to sort of add to the mix of things that are suggesting that drivers slow down. And then lastly, we have traffic circles. These really are only a good option for intersections that are really large. That is not Greenland and Kennedy, so we won't spend a ton of time on this, but ultimately, like any other kind of maneuvering device, these force vehicles to drive slower just by making them kind of turn around it as they're traveling along the road. So this is the concept we've put together for Greenland Avenue. The cushions are laid out to be as evenly spaced as possible, but we were working with some hills along the way. So I don't know if there were any spots that we like definitely couldn't put any speed cushions. This is a spacing that I kind of like. It's roughly even. And the average spacing here is 400 feet. And that's kind of the lower end of that range that we're working with. Usually 300 is pretty tight, about as tight as we would ever go. We've got a couple cushions that slide under that just because we wanted the average to be an appropriate amount. But ultimately, we've got seven locations here. Like I said, this is a very long block as blocks go. So while it may seem like a lot, they're designed to be spaced such that you don't have time to really get back up to a dangerous speed between cushions. So I know we've looked at a lot so far. Happy to talk about anything on this page, or if there are questions about any of the tools, anything that you would like to see that you're not seeing, feel free to come off mute, ask away. And the next thing we're going to talk about is sort of the next steps in the program, how we vote, what happens with the design, sort of all that stuff.
Hey, David, can you hear me? This is Ted.
Yes, I can hear you.
Hey, first of all, that looks fantastic regarding the cushions. Would we be able to get any kind of school zone signage or at least some more signs indicating that it is 25 miles an hour?
Yeah, I looked into that. I still need to sort of put together my final proposal incorporating everyone's feedback and get with NDOT about it. I think they would be fine doing that. They may be hesitant to roll it into this project because these do kind of take a long time to get through the construction queue. So what I'll do is check, see if they would prefer to do that this way. I would recommend doing a hub request either way, and that way they'll have it on their records. If they're able to get to it sooner, they can.
Great.
But I will say they have been focusing on schools all over, Davidson County, looking for ways to improve the safety there.
Yeah, right now those signs don't really start until just before the school.
Yeah,
Um,
I noticed that, and it does seem a little tight there.
yeah.
Um, so they may prefer to scooch those further up the hill. Um, I'll just have to get with them and see what they want to do.
Okay.
But
Well, thanks.
absolutely, the goal is to create a good environment for folks walking to school.
Thank you. That's our primary concern.
Yeah.
Hey, David. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Awesome. This looks awesome. And I'm curious about your thoughts about the center line on our street. Do you think the center line encourages people to hug the sides? And if getting rid of it is on the table as maybe something that could maybe encourage people to maybe give the wider zones where we usually walk a little bit more, I don't know, psychological room or something.
Yeah, you're dead on with the center line. I am not a huge fan of them myself, unless the road is seeing enough traffic that they're necessary, or is hilly and curvy enough is sort of another reason. Um, we'll have to see if they're willing to actually like grind it off. The main problem with doing that is it creates a spot for water to collect where that pavement marking used to be, and that can shorten the life of pavement. So I'm also planning on sort of circling up with NDOT. If Greenland is getting paved at some point in the near future, they may prefer to just um, leave it as is until then, and then not restripe it when it gets repaved. But I'd like to give you an answer that is a little more definitive on what the plan is. So I'll let you know that I agree with the sentiment, and we'll look into what the best way to have that not be there is, if there's that option available.
That's awesome. I appreciate it. Is there, if that's coming up in the next little bit too, it would there potentially be a way as we get closer to the school to to paint something on the ground that says like school approaching or school zone approaching, so it's a big visual thing like on the street? Is that part of this thing, or is that more of an NDOT sort of purview?
That will still fall into the kind of the same answer as the signage. It's not specifically traffic calming, but they may want to just do it while they're out here doing work. Um, so same course of action. I'll take a note of it, see if we can loop it into this project. But a standalone hub request for it also wouldn't hurt. Um, and they very well may decide to get to it sooner if they go that route.
Cool. Thank you very much.
Of course. All right. Well, there will be more time for questions at the end, but what I can do is kind of keep moving along in the slides, talk about where we are in the process and what's next. So this flow chart sort of describes the whole program. We start with the application. Of course, thank you to those who took the effort to apply and do all that on the front end. Next, we did our prioritization and selection. So that's when we collected the data and then ultimately ranked all the streets by need. And then we're here at that red circle, the neighborhood meeting. So we advertised this with mailers to the owners of every parcel along Greenland, collecting feedback from all of you. So this is the time to make any preference, suggestions, ideas. We're here to take all of it down and bring it into our design. What we'll do next is a site visit to go out, see the road. I mean, I've been on Greenland plenty of times, but in the engineering context, do the site visit, and then sort of refine our concept design based on the feedback. See if there's anything we need to change or reconsider while we put our plans together. And then we can actually go one of two ways. we're able to schedule a second neighborhood meeting if you all want to take a look at the plans that we've done, offer more feedback, take any more questions before kind of a final version that gets voted on. We can also, if y'all are generally happy with what you're seeing, finish the designs, post them online, and then start voting like right away. And then after the ballot happens, that's like a 6-week process or so. It'll go into construction, and we'll see in that construction bubble, the timeline is between 8 and 10 months. A little point of clarity, that's just to like get to the front of the line. The projects themselves get built very quickly, like inside a week or so. But there is a pretty massive backlog at the moment. So we're making sure to get the projects built first that applied and were selected first. But then ultimately, should the ballot pass, we'll do Greenland, once it's time. So this is sort of a point where we'll make that decision. Do we want that second neighborhood meeting or move on to the online ballot? We're more than happy to do either. It's just we want to offer the opportunity for the time savings that come with forgoing the second meeting if that's what residents are interested in.
Hey, David, this is Ted again. I know here in our house, we would prefer, especially if we're able to review the final design online, it would be our vote to skip the second meeting and move on to the ballot, provided that everyone involved was able, again, to review it and still have feedback.
Yeah. They'll be posted online shortly before voting. So to clarify a little bit, if you review them online, there won't be the ability to like change the design substantially before it gets voted on, if that's important. But they will be, available for review before, voting yes or no.
What are the chances that there would be less cushions or less calming than what you just described?
Basically none.
Okay.
I'm pretty satisfied with this design's ability to accomplish the goals.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, on that note, I think we would probably elect to skip the second meeting just from our vantage point. I'm not sure how everyone else feels about that, but thank you.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, if anyone feels differently, feel free to speak up, or you can also email me. That's fine too. Really, whatever works. But tentatively, we'll plan on just going to that ballot, and y'all will have my contact information by the end of this meeting, so we can keep in touch that way as well, if necessary. So with that, we'll spend a little bit of time talking about the sort of finer mechanics of the balloting, just because this may be the last time that we're all talking together before you do it. But basically, we'll advertise that the same way we advertised this meeting. So sending out a postcard to all of the addresses of those owners of the parcels. We do that way because those are the public records available to Nashville. So say you live one place, own another house on Greenland, the postcard is going to the address that Metro has on file. So if you were to look into the property records, that's who's receiving those. It'll have instructions on how to vote online. So it's an online form. You name, last name, address, yes or no, basically is it. And that'll be open for 6 weeks. So we'll send the postcards, and there will be kind of that 6-week window where people have to get online and vote. We like to keep that plenty long because not everyone's home all the time. And then, like I mentioned before, I would love to trust the mail to have like a perfect record, but we just don't. So we want to make sure there's time. If anyone thinks they should have gotten a ballot, they can reach out to us, and we'll make sure they're able to vote if they're supposed to. It does take 66% of respondents to vote yes. So that's 2/3. But to clarify, that's not 2/3 of like every property on the street. It's just 2/3 of those who respond. So kind of like any election, just those who are voting are counted yes or no. A bit about eligibility. So I mentioned this is kind of a neighborhood-led program. So for reasons in pursuit of that, we only are considering residential properties. Churches and schools each get a vote. I don't think you have either of those on here. If you own multiple properties in that right of way, we'll just send you one postcard with one vote. It's not like vote how many properties you have. Vacant properties, if any, are ineligible. So that'd be like if the house was under construction or demolished, visibly vacant. We're not like, peering in anyone's windows, making sure that folks are in there. And then importantly, businesses are eligible. So I haven't confirmed if those two on Gallatin Pike are businesses, but I suspect they probably are. If it's not like a residence, then they won't be sent a postcard to vote on the traffic calming. And with that, we're at our kind of last question period. You can go back to any of the balloting stuff if y'all have questions, or really anything, design, toolbox, prioritization, whatever y'all want to do.
I have like kind of a quick question on the
Sure.
balloting. I know you guys are taping the meeting, and it'll be available for anybody to watch. So like for some of our neighbors that may not have made the meeting tonight, like the data that you provide it's hard to argue against for anybody questioning the context of why this is on the, it's here. So like, is it possible to include maybe a link to the data and stuff that you guys have about this on the mailer? So if anybody gets this thing out of the blue and they haven't been sort of like paying attention to the process, that they could refer to this and be like, oh yeah, well, my experience of having cars whiz past me, plus the data suggests that like maybe I was on the fence and at first I wasn't sure, but now that I see all the numbers and stuff, then absolutely, I feel like all of that stuff is very convincing, even to folks who may just have this coming out of the blue to them and just going to help. You know what I mean? What do you think?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we can definitely share the slide deck itself in case folks want to like quickly review it without watching the 45-minute video. I don't know if we have the data from all the streets published online, or if there's like a place on the web that would show that 37 mile an hour, 85th speed. Yeah, like this slide is that generally what you're talking about?
Yeah, I guess like more or less if I haven't seen the mailer or whatever. I'm curious about, does the mailer just include the ballot with the question, do you want this or not? Or does it include the ballot with, here's some reasons why this is going to have an impact on your quality of life and not being destroyed by a F-150 going 60 miles an hour down the street?
Oh, I
And
see.
so like, if anybody is wondering, oh, I get this thing, I'm voting yes or no to speed bumps on my street. That's a bummer. It's the context of I'm voting not for speed bumps on my street. I'm voting for a much safer environment for everybody who lives here. It's safe to say that the folks that are doing the most speeding on our street are not any of the people that live in the area between Gallatin and Kennedy. They're always folks that are zooming through. I think everybody has had the same experience. So I guess it's just providing more context with the data that you have kind of shared and collected, about like the turning the lived experience of us into numbers that are kind of shocking. If that's a possibility to add it to it or in some way link, I just think that is going to be helpful for anybody who is wondering more about the process and the stuff around it.
Yeah, that's definitely a good idea. I'll do a little bit of thinking and see what we're able to publish. I'm on this slide because the mailer that we send out is that kind of top left postcard with the instructions, and it's, in my opinion, pretty cluttered already. I think it's like size 9 font or something like that. So we may not include more information on that particular piece of mail, but definitely there are other ways to spread the word. Certainly, we encourage people to talk to their neighbors if they're excited about this. Doesn't necessarily mean knocking on every door, but yeah, we like to make sure people are sort of aware of the context, but I don't know if specifically we're sending out anything that says like we measured 37 miles an hour on this street.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Sure. All right. Well, if anyone has more questions, feel free to speak up. Otherwise, you can email me. This is my email address. I'll ask that you also copy our counterparts at NDOT. They're NDOT TrafficCalming.Nashville.gov, just to keep them in the loop. They don't do these meetings, but they work very hard in tandem with us as we get these projects in the ground. And then, as I mentioned earlier, this is the QR code to the Traffic Calming website. And then Nashville's got a handful of social media accounts as well that they like to plug for people to give them a follow and stay up to date. But that's all I've got for tonight. Everyone, thanks for jumping on a good call. Appreciate everyone being involved and yeah, getting this project moving along.
Thanks for providing all the information and the time and the presentation. Thank you very, very much.
Of course.
And the design looks awesome. It's really exciting.
But glad you think so.
Thank you, David. So I guess at this point, we're just waiting for the next mailer. Is that correct? Or
yeah, if I don't hear from anyone that they definitely want a second meeting, we're going to go out, do a field visit, take some measurements, make sure none of the hills are too steep, all that. And then ultimately, finalize the design and send it off to be voted on. So we'll usually publish it online first and then send the mailers just to make sure nothing goes wrong and people don't get mailers and come to find there's no design to review. But yeah, basically the next mailer will show up. We'll also let Council Member Benedict know when that's coming. So she may post about it in her newsletter as well.
great.
And then there aren't too many people on this call, so if anyone does get a mailer, like feel free to kind of ask around, make sure your neighbors did as well. Like I said, I'd love to believe that the mail was 100% effective, but we've never been there. So anyone who thinks they should have gotten the mailer or wants to vote and just doesn't have the link, they can reach out to me. We help people vote all the time.
And
All right.
just to clarify too, it's just the block between the residences, between the owners, between Gallatin and Kennedy that are voting, not the rest of Greenland.
That's correct. Yeah,
Okay.
it's just the effective right of way. And we do that because it's really you all that are affected the most by the speeding there.
Great. Well, thank you so much. This was terrific. I really appreciate it.
Of course. You'll have a good evening.
You too. Thank you.